Okay, so thank you all so much for joining us this evening for the graduate student panel. We're so excited to host 3 amazing graduate students from the aerospace engineering department. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, please submit them in the chat and keep your video and a mic off for now. That'll be great. So to start off with Alex, she's a 3rd-year PhD student working with Dr. Flato, studying the effects of particle ingestion on turbulence in gas turbine jet engines. She has a bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering and mathematical sciences from Florida Tech, and a master's degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Wisconsin. Her background and specialty interest is in computational fluid dynamics. Next, we have Emily. She's a 3rd-year graduate student in the Rotorcraft Center. She's researching lithium-sulfur batteries for electric aviation. She has a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from Northeastern University, and she's an active and past board member of WIAA, and she's really excited to be here. Finally, we have Peter. He recently graduated from UMD in May with a bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering, and he's now beginning his master's of science under Dr. Chopra. He spent the summer working as a student intern with the Army Research Lab, and he's going to continue as a part-time employee throughout the school year with plans to research aeromechanics and controls of small unmanned air systems. So he's a year ahead of me and the other seniors, and Peter says he can offer a really fresh perspective on grad school. So thank you all so much for being here. So we had some pre-submitted questions, so I'm going to start with those. And like I said, any of our panelists, just feel free to chime in. So first question, what factors did you look at when deciding to go straight to graduate school from undergrad?
Oh boy, okay. We're getting deep already. I'll start because I guess I literally just went through this. So when I was in your position, Rachel, and presumably other people on the call, I think everybody was asking kind of a similar question. I think some people were dead set already. They had an internship over the summer and worked at, a certain company a couple times or had connections, and they were dead set, okay, I'm gonna go work at this company. I've had enough of school. And like, I get it. Like, that's a good option for a lot of people. For me, for my particular case, I worked at Aurora Flight Sciences to kind of get like a perspective on what the industry setting would be like. And so I sort of made my judgment based on that, and also based on the undergraduate research that I had done. And from that, I realized that if I really wanted to do stuff that was, stuff that was more, how do you say, like more independent, as in like where the company can really place more trust into you in order for you to do things kind of on your own, or to just do simply more technical things, then you would need a master's degree. And I also kind of realized that because when I was looking around the office at all the full-time employees, pretty much all of them had either a master's degree or a PhD. And so just based on that simple fact, I realized I might as well go ahead and get a master's and just go straight through and just get a master's. So that was kind of the biggest reasoning for it. Although there were other reasons too, but that was the biggest one for sure.
I didn't go straight into grad school, so I don't know if this question applies to me, but I decided to go to grad school because I wanted to kind of switch my area of study. So because I did chemical engineering for undergrad, and then decided I wanted to go into the aviation field, and I thought a higher degree would help me to do that.
And so I did go from my bachelor's to master's program immediately. But after I graduated with my master's degree, I actually decided to work in industry for a little bit before making the leap to go back to graduate school to pursue a PhD. I think my advice would be definitely a master's degree. I think is a really strong degree to get. You can obviously see like the benefits of getting a huge pay jump from the bachelor's to the master's degree, but you also get to specialize just a little bit more by taking some harder classes. So if you're really interested in a certain area, the master's is really good for getting that kind of technical aspect. The PhD is like if you're really obsessed with something and you just want to spend 4 or 5 years like, you know, pursuing a research topic. For me, that's what it was like. I loved getting the master's degree and I loved working in industry, but I just really wanted a little more technical expertise and research in a certain area. So that's why I made the leap.
Thank you all. I guess the next question kind of ties into, Alex, what you mentioned, going back to industry. Do you feel like your time in industry made it more difficult for you to go back to graduate school, or just to decide on graduate school later on?
No, personally. But I had a different path than Peter and Allie, so.
Yeah, I think for me, getting back into classwork after not doing classwork for a while was a little bit of like a harder thing to do. Not like technically, but just like the scheduling. Like when you work a 9-to-5 job, then having to readjust to kind of the student lifestyle can be a little different because maybe your hours are a little more wonky. But it wasn't like a major, I don't think it was a major inconvenience.
Cool, thank you. So the next question is about recommendations, like when applying to graduate school. The question is, do all of your recommendations have to come from engineering professors, or can they be professors in different areas of study?
I can answer part of
Oh,
that.
yeah, go ahead.
I believe I got my recommendations from, first and foremost from professors at UMD already. That's a big leap for sure. A lot of undergrads don't have professors that they can comfortably go up to and ask, would you give me a recommendation to go into grad school? And quite frankly, I think that if you don't really have that in already within undergrad, it kind of suggests that you haven't been doing any research. So you're kind of leaning already towards the more industry side of things. And so maybe it's not the best idea to go straight to grad school, because then you're kind of starting like fresh in the sense that you kind of need to find a professor once you're in grad school, which people do, but it might not be the best option. I really think that if you're going to transition straight into grad school, you should already be doing some sort of undergraduate research with professors. And it's never too late to start. I know plenty of people that started doing research their senior year. And it's as simple as just going up to professors, either in class and just asking, hey, I'm interested in doing research. Can I do research for you? Or do you know someone that I can do research for? I guess in Zoom land, it might be a little bit more difficult, but there's still plenty of professors and there's still a lot of opportunities for that. So, but yeah, primarily my recommendations came from professors. So.
Yeah, mine came from professors or like past bosses. But I think as long as whoever is writing your letter can, you know, talk about your work ethic and kind of like what type of student or like employee you are, and kind of like your motivation and what drives you, then it would be a good letter.
Yeah, I agree with what Emily just said.
Okay, next question is, how do you go about finding appropriate industry employment opportunities while in grad school?
Is that like an internship, do you mean, or like after graduation?
I think they mean like an internship, like during the summer while you're in graduate school.
That's from what I've seen. That's something that you work out with your advisor. So they would probably have some connections or know people who take summer interns along those same lines of your research. So that'd be something you would work out with them, in my experience.
Yeah, my experience is basically just what Emily said. Since I started the PhD program, I've had summer internships at ARL every summer, and that's always been facilitated through my advisor and her established connections with them.
Yeah, I also want to just say, because if you're doing research during your master's degree, chances are that like middle summer between your first and second year of master's is where you would probably work either in a research lab at the university or at whatever company it is that is funding your research. So I think for some of us, it sounds like, including me, I interned at ARL, the Army Research Lab, and I'll be doing the same over the summer. And so that like middle summer is kind of used on that. The summer before you start grad school can be kind of used for whatever you want in theory. And then the summers and, you know, after graduating can be kind of whatever, depending on your own personal situation. But yeah.
And there's also sometimes opportunities to like collaborate with the company or lab in a company with your research. So that could be like an ongoing thing too, like not only for the summer.
Yep, that's exactly what I'm doing. So essentially the summer is more time to do research, and school is school and this much research.
The next question is, how did you figure out what you wanted to study in graduate school, and how did you decide what research you wanted to do?
My experience was actually working. So my background is in computational fluid dynamics, and so when I graduated with my master's, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I had a really nice opportunity to work for a CFD software company. And while I was working there, I really got a feel for like what I liked about this area of study and what I didn't like about it. And so that really helped me kind of focus what I would want to pursue for my research.
I mean, for me, it was as simple as what was I doing in undergrad? I like to fly things, you know, so flying contraptions are kind of my thing. And so I realized that if I wanted to keep doing that, it would be pretty difficult to find a company that would, that also was doing kind of like UAS type of stuff. And so the two options were to either start my own company or go and, you know, do research in the lab and that kind of in grad school. Because the reality is it's very difficult with a bachelor's degree, regardless of the undergraduate research that you did, to get to kind of influence a company which doesn't know you, that you're capable of you know, doing work on UAS or whatever specialized thing that you're interested in. And so the master's degree kind of gives you the leg up in that sense. It kind of gives you that like certification stamp of approval that like, okay, you actually know like this kind of stuff. And so that's, anyway, that's kind of off topic, but you get the point.
I forgot the question.
Oh, I can repeat it. How did you figure out what you wanted to study in graduate school?
Oh, okay. My current advisor actually contacted me with this project and asked if I wanted to work on it. It's aligned with my interest in aviation and my past experience working with electrochemistry and batteries. And I liked that idea, so here I am. That's, yeah.
So the next question, what did you ask your advisors and like the labs that you're currently in before deciding to join their labs and work on their projects?
So assuming that all the like research questions were already taken care of, my emphasis was one on talking about like work-life balance, really understanding like my advisor's mentality, so I knew how to work with her. I think part of like probably one of the most important aspects of graduate school is selecting the right advisor and working with the right advisor. And so it's way easier, it's super uncomfortable, it's way easier up front to ask those questions that like, hey, my work style is I'm a morning person and I don't answer emails like late at night, you know, is that going to be okay? Or like, I like taking a Sunday for myself, is that cool? Some research advisors like you know, they have different expectations, so it's really like important to talk about stuff like that that is really outside of the research. And then within the research, it's also a good idea to talk about what their expectations are in terms of publications and like time frames in terms of like when you have to meet certain deadlines, whether it's for publications or for taking like for PhD, for taking your comprehensive exams or something.
I'll just add on. I think that that question is more of a question towards what school do you want to go to?
I would add to that too, like
because generally you're not gonna have two labs that focus on the same thing at one school. It'll kind of be a mix of both if that's the case. So I think if you're interested in rotorcraft, you're gonna join the rotorcraft lab. If you're interested in controls, you'll work with Dr. Sanner or Dr. Paley or something like that. So yeah.
I think another good thing, like a good question to ask while you're looking for which school or lab to join is kind of how long the students usually take to graduate, whether with their master's or their PhD. Because some professors are really good about it, but others can take a long time.
The last submitted question is, did you all apply for any fellowships or outside funding? And what advice do you have for someone that is applying to fellowships and trying to get money for their graduate school education?
Don't go to graduate school unless you're getting funded some way. Like, it's really, I think, especially in STEMs, particularly in aerospace engineering, there's usually always money to pay for graduate students. And whether it's through a fellowship or a grant that the professors have, or through teaching assistantships on campus, it's really not common, I feel like, for engineering master's or PhD students to really ever pay. That the caveat is, like, you'll probably at some point have to apply for additional funding while you're in graduate school, especially if you're going on to the PhD level, because sometimes like money can, you know, get moved around. But usually that's something I feel like you would work under the advisement of your advisor. So they'll kind of give you an idea like, oh, you should apply for this fellowship, and they'll help you to some extent, like preparing the applications and stuff. But prior to, like, for your first semester when you're applying to graduate school, you really ideally want to match yourself with an advisor who has funding to at least support you for your first year to 2 years.
Yeah, I agree with that. The other thing is that sometimes professors will want you to do a PhD or commit to a PhD in order to get funding. And so I know plenty of people who have had to say no to professors who have wanted them to come, but they didn't want to do a PhD. They just wanted to do a master's. So you kind of just gotta ask around. And I know people will literally just email professors, especially right now, you can't even meet them. So you have to just email them and just go on their lab websites and whatnot and just shoot them an email and say, hey, I'm interested. And just bluntly ask them, is there funding opportunities? It's, I guess, kind of a weird question to ask, but it's perfectly logical. So
yeah, For most graduate schools, I think if you're doing a master's, you would probably get a teaching assistantship. So you'd be a TA as well as do research and take classes. University of Maryland is a little different in aerospace engineering where you might not have to do that. And then for like outside fellowships, there are definitely some popular ones like NSF. I know some people who have done that to get funding. And then there's like ND-STEG, I think. So there are like other fellowships out there that you can get outside of the university.
So we have 2 questions in the chat. How much did it help to get a job with a master's degree compared to a bachelor's degree?
I think it was like way easier. So before, okay, there was like a small period of time when I had my bachelor's degree that I was trying to find a job and I couldn't. And I'm not saying that's what prompted me to do my master's degree, but I did notice when I graduated with my master's degree, I felt like I had a lot more opportunity to like have interviews and actually try to, you know, get jobs. So I'm all about getting a master's degree.
I found too that when I was looking for jobs with my bachelor's degree, a lot of the ones that I was, qualified for were obviously entry level, but they were not really what I wanted to do. Like they were, lab grunt work, which isn't really up my alley. But I can't speak to anything with a higher degree because I haven't tried that yet.
Yeah, I can't speak to it either, but I will say I think that you have a much better opportunity of getting what you want with the master's than you would with a bachelor's. So.
The next question is, looking back, what's something or multiple somethings you would do differently with the graduate school application process?
Well, yeah. So, okay. So I personally had kind of a weird way of getting in. So first and foremost, make sure you have like the GPA requirement. Make sure you have one big thing, which I also just didn't realize. This is kind of, particular, but when you take the GRE, if there's anybody who's planning on taking the GRE, I think it's a little different this year because I know some schools aren't wanting the GRE necessarily. I think they'd probably still look at it. So if you do well on it, you might as well send it in. But when you take the GRE, make sure that you don't send the score until you see the score. So that's what I wish, because I sent a score that wasn't so good. So I should have waited. But anyway, I retook it and all was well in the end. But make sure that you send the score after you get the score.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. So when I did my master's degree, I was a stellar student, but I just am really bad at standardized testing like that. And so my GRE scores weren't great. I took them a couple of times and I couldn't get them to the standard that I think they say is recommended for most PhD in aerospace engineering. So I contacted just the department just to see if they required the GRE scores to be submitted. And like at University of Maryland and a couple other universities, they don't actually require that, so long as you have some other supplemental things that can kind of show that you're capable of doing well in graduate school. So for me, because I came in with a master's degree, I luckily had kind of that and then work experience as well. But if not, what Peter was saying about doing like undergraduate research, like kind of padding your resume a little bit can help if like the test scores aren't super great.
Yeah, especially because if you have strong connections with professors, a lot of times they can vouch for you, so it's not just strictly academics that gets you into grad school. Sure, if you have like a 4.0 GPA and a perfect score in the GRE, you can get in anywhere, I'm sure. But Most of us don't have that. So if you have good, solid connections with professors who can vouch for you, or not even just that, but if you worked at a company and the company loves you and they send a whole bunch of, recommendations, or if you won some sort of competition somewhere, that's like, a good thing to show. Like that stuff definitely helps in getting to the admissions people so that they, can accept you.
I would add just a recommendation for when you're doing these applications. Do your research, and if you're applying to a school, contact professors who you would be interested in working with there, and try and see if they're accepting students, and see if they have funding, and see if they have a project you're interested in. And do this before you submit the application. So then when you submit your application, you can write in your statement of purpose that you're interested in working with this professor, and that I think goes a long way in your application.
So the next question is, what is writing a thesis or dissertation like, and how different are the two?
I guess I kind of have to answer that one. So I actually did the non-thesis option for my master's degree. And that was just a preference. I didn't want to stay the extra semester, and I got the job offer, so that's kind of why I did that. But thesis requirements for a master's degree are usually, I would kind of ballpark to be like maybe half the amount of work, or probably even less than half the amount of work of like a dissertation. My advisor kind of tells me that for a PhD dissertation, it should be comprised of 2 to 3 journal papers that you've published, which means kind of like 3 big kind of significant contributions to research in some way. Whereas like with a master's degree, I think the thesis doesn't have to be so, it's not like you're adding to the bulk of knowledge in the field of engineering, but you're not like developing something new on the level that you're supposed to be for a PhD. So maybe doing like applications work for a master's degree, like, oh, you've got, a new application that we want to do some testing for. So just generating data or something without like the heavy analysis that you might have to do for the PhD level. But the dissertations are usually like 300 pages, and the master's thesis could be like anywhere from like 150 to 200 pages.
Another quick question, what was the non-thesis option like for you?
The non-thesis option was pretty cool in the sense that you just really do classwork, and then you do like an independent research project. So my master's degree was in mechanical engineering, and so I was kind of bummed like that I couldn't do the research I really wanted to do. So that's kind of why I decided to do the non-thesis option. But I really got to like focus on just taking classwork, and then I got to make my own independent research project myself, and then pursue that for a year. I don't know, I think every university is different as to how they set up their non-thesis programs, but usually it just is comprised of more classwork and then a small independent research project.
The next question is, what if a company will pay for graduate school? Do you think that they would only pay for you after you've worked for them for a while? So like you have to work in industry first and then go to graduate school, or could you do it like simultaneously?
I think the situation is usually that you go work for the company, and once you're an employee there, you can go to grad school and have them pay for part of it or all of it, depending on the company. But sometimes there is a stipulation where after you finish your degree, you have to work for the company for like X amount of years or whatever afterwards.
Yeah, and the caveat that I know of is, which would be applicable for aerospace engineering, the Department of Defense offers a SMART fellowship, which is basically like you apply for funding because you know you want to work for some section of the DoD. So you apply for this fellowship. And if you get awarded the fellowship, they'll sponsor your studies all throughout graduate school, and however many years they pay, that's how many years you contractually obligated to work for them once you graduate. So it's a way to kind of secure the funding while also securing a job immediately after graduating.
Yeah, I guess my situation is a little different. I just uh, did enough undergraduate research because I started freshman year, and kind of just built those connections within ARL as I went, and eventually interned with them. And yeah, they just ended up paying for grad school, which is super cool. Thank you, ARL. But I will say it's very nice because um, part of me was kind of thinking, okay, like maybe the master's degree will be similar to bachelor's. I get it'll be harder, but you know, my kind of thought process was that it'll be sort of the same sort of thing. But then I realized that, oh, and mind you, I just started like 3 weeks ago, but this is all very fresh. But what I realized is that that I'm getting paid to essentially go to class, which is kind of awesome. So it kind of motivates you to do well, and it also it's just different in that sense. You're not paying. It's like the roles have been reversed in some way.
So that was the last of the submitted questions. Does anyone else on the call have a question they want to ask? You can go ahead and unmute yourself since there's not that many people on. Oh, here's another question. For PhD candidates, can you speak to what the preliminary and comprehensive exams are like?
Yeah, so at University of Maryland, at least, you have to take the qualifying exam and the comprehensive exam. And the qualifying comes first, and it's an oral exam, and also consists of you writing basically, I think it's 3 pages. I don't remember the page limit. They give you a series of questions on a certain topic, and you have to do basically a literature review and answer the questions, and then propose a research project based on something that you think would benefit this field of study. Then you have to present on it to your committee, which is 3 people, and then they'll ask you questions about it. And then once you pass that, you're like a pre-candidate, I think, for PhD. And then once the comprehensive exam comes later, and that's after you finish all your classes, and that's an oral exam as well, and that is basically an exam of all of your classwork that you've taken. And then if you pass that, then you're a PhD candidate, and you have to do your dissertation. Well, I guess you don't have to, but most people do. And that's different at different schools too. I remember when I was looking for which grad school to go to, there was usually at least one exam. It wasn't always an oral exam, sometimes it was written. So different schools have different types of tests that you have to take.
Yeah, I think some universities, like for the qualifying exam, they actually want you to do your real thesis proposal. So the work that you're actually going to be doing for your dissertation, which is different from what Emily explained and what we do at University of Maryland, where they kind of give us like a fake topic, or like they have us do a fake thesis proposal. And then I've heard of some universities for their comps actually doing written exams, where you select like 3 subjects that you want to get tested on, and then you've got like 8 hours or something to sit in the written exams. So yeah, that's it's definitely a consideration, looking into like the graduate student guides at the universities you're interested in applying to see what type of comps and quals they have you do, because it's very different depending on what university you're at.
How did you choose who was on your committee, or were you able to choose?
So the university has like, so for the qualifying exam at University of Maryland, your advisor is one of the 3 committee members, and then the department the department or your advisor kind of chooses arbitrarily 2 other people to be on your committee. But for the comprehensives, for the comps and then for your dissertation, they're usually the same committee, and it's made up of 5 professors at the university. I think 4 of them have to be in the department. So 4 of them have to be aerospace. One of them has to be the dean's representative, which has to be outside of the department. And usually, like, I've made my committee based off of what I feel like the main topics of my PhD research are. So I picked my professors based on the kind of knowledge that I'm expected to have by the end of this, and those people who are knowledgeable in those areas. And then there's also some people who are just like super nice to have on committees. So I've also selected professors based on the reputation they have in terms of like throughout the department.
Yeah, I'll just add to that and say that that's something that your advisor can also help with. Like if you don't really know who to choose, they'll probably guide you in the right way.
Any other questions from the audience? You can put them in the chat or just unmute yourself. Okay, if not, then I guess I have a question for you all. What made you decide on graduate school here?
Well, first of all, there's no better school than University of Maryland, obviously. So that was, first and foremost. I think for me, it was just like, well, first of all, if you're going straight from undergrad into your master's, then it's probably best to just kind of stick with the same school if you only want to get a master's. If you want to get a PhD, generally, I think the recommendation is you can stay at the same school, but I think the recommendation is that you kind of venture out to a different school if you're going for a PhD, so that you do your master's and your PhD together at a different school. But I know that from people that I know, if you're just getting a master's, you generally just sort of stay with the same school. So that's my recommendation. Pretty simple.
I chose University of Maryland because I liked the proposed project that I would be working on, and I thought my advisor and I would get along, which so far has proven true. And University of Maryland has a really good reputation in the aerospace community, like one of the top schools.
Yes, so I got into a couple of universities, and ultimately when I made my choice, it was based on funding, and then also I grew up in Maryland, so I wanted to like move back to Maryland and be around my family. But yeah, like University of Maryland also has a really great reputation, so I thought that was a good move to make.
And I feel like University of Maryland also, like, not only do they have a good reputation, but has a lot of good connections. So like the professors and your advisor could have like people in industry or in government that you then go to for questions or for internships and things like that.
But I also will say, don't feel like weird about applying to other schools, even if you already think that you want to stay at UMD. If there's a certain lab or something that attracts you to a different school, I say completely go for it. Don't hold back on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually like, so when it's really interesting that what Peter said about staying. And I'm kind of on the opposite side of things, where when I was finishing my bachelor's degree, my advisor was like, I was like, all right, I'm going to stay and I'm going to start my master's here. And he was like, no. And I was like, oh my God, why? Do you not want me? And he was like, no, 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 it's not that. It's just, you just need to get out and kind of explore the world a little bit. Just see engineering, aerospace from like a different perspective. And so for me, I really love that advice. And I made sure that like for my bachelor's, master's, and PhD, I did them all at different universities. Because there is something to be said about how you're kind of taught to be an engineer, and how you realize that no matter like whatever part of the country you're at, you're going to learn something a little different, but it's going to help you see kind of aerodynamics, for instance, from a different perspective when it's taught in different ways from different groups. So definitely like don't be afraid to apply to other universities. Like if it's always good to, if you think you can get into University of Maryland to do your master's degree, like definitely apply for it, but definitely apply for at least like 2 or 3 other schools too, and take the time to see like, you know, what those schools may have to offer in terms of making you really well-rounded.
Yeah, I think that also kind of is like the reasoning behind why there's professors at UMD who've come from other schools that isn't UMD. It's kind of like academic inbreeding almost, where you kind of need people from other places and you kind of need to venture out because things aren't the same in other schools. And I think that's something you learn pretty quickly when you meet other people from the same major from other schools.
Rashawn, you had a question? You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, Emily kind of somewhat mentioned it, and I'm sorry I'm late, guys. So hopefully this wasn't asked already. But I was just kind of curious as to how you guys were going about, or to whom it concerns, how are you guys going about trying to get industry jobs while you're in grad school? Like, how are you, like, I guess keeping your head up with that? And like, I guess especially, how are you going about trying to get like positions that you couldn't have gotten like right out of undergrad in the first place?
Yeah, so it's fairly simple. Really, it's just same as a bachelor's, I would say, in the sense that you build your connections, and the opportunities you'll get by doing a master's will give you kind of more options to choose from in terms of things that you want to do. I know for me, it was if I just had a bachelor's degree, it was a lot of, because I'm doing air track, it was a lot of like, do I want to do structures? Do I want to do aerodynamics? And it was very broad, you know? And so that's where the master's degree can kind of be like, okay, I like structures, but I like how batteries integrate into structures, that kind of thing. And so that's sort of what that can give you. And then in terms of just finding a company to work for, yeah, it's just a matter of whether, like for me, it's just the company I'm currently working for, ARL. But I mean, I see plenty of master's students that go to career fairs still and try and find jobs that way. So basically it's sort of a similar thing to bachelor's in that sense.
I think another aspect of doing graduate school is you get more opportunities to actually publish your work and make presentations in a public forum with other engineers. So if you're not used to networking, like you definitely want to learn how to do that, because those are great opportunities, going to like a conference and presenting something, and then meeting other people from industry and just shaking hands and swapping business cards or whatever. It's way more informal in some sense than going to a career fair, but the connection that you can tend to make with someone that you meet at a conference can go a lot longer than, or it can go a longer way than just like, you know, the person that you meet at a career fair.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Presenting and like putting your work out there can really connect you to the people who are interested in your work. And in terms of like getting jobs in graduate school, whether it's like a part-time job or an internship, you can use those connections for that. And then also like the department has connections. WIAA has connections. And other schools have similar groups too that can help you.
So our next question is, how hard did you find graduate classes compared to undergrad, and how is maintaining the balance between research and doing your classes?
What was the first part of the question again?
How hard do you find graduate classes compared to undergrad?
Okay. Well, I just started, so maybe someone else can go ahead and give a better perspective on that.
I've found that they're more time consuming, and you kind of go deeper into the material. So it's more difficult in that sense, but it's definitely manageable. It's not like too over your head, at least that's what I've found so far. The workload between classes and research, it varies, I guess. Like here at UMD, when you're taking 3 classes a semester, that's really all you'll have time for. But then when you get past your first year and you're taking fewer classes, you do have more time for research. So it is kind of hard to find that balance, but there is a balance, and usually your advisor is pretty understanding, like when you have exams or something like that.
This might be kind of a divisive perspective on coursework in graduate school, but at least for the PhD, it feels like the classes themselves, the grade that you get, aren't as important as they are in undergraduate courses. So your undergraduate GPA is super important, and for the most part, in most engineering graduate classes, you'll get a B. Even if you suck, you'll get a B. Like, and I don't know, it's just a thing where I think professors understand that they're not here to test you on like your memorization skills or your abilities to use equations and plug in answers. They're just trying to like pass on some more higher level knowledge to you and hope that it's applicable for the research that you're going to be doing. So when it comes to the actual classes, sometimes the workload, it seems ridiculous. But other times, like, you have professors who just understand you're just here to kind of gain some more knowledge and not necessarily have the time to spend 20 hours a week on homework or something. So I've had graduate classes where I've had no homework assignments, no exams, and maybe like a project or something. I don't, Dr. Shelley. And I've also had classes where you have regular homework, like with Dr. Dada or something. Like, he gives you regular homework, but he's also really lenient. So if you can't make a deadline for homework because you're doing research because you're too busy, you can talk to him about it. He's really flexible. A lot of professors, when you're in graduate classes, are just really understanding. And I think it's just because the mentality of classwork in the master's and PhD program is that they're just here to help you do your research better. They're not necessarily here because you need it to get a certification. You're taking classes that are directly applicable to what you want to pursue, right? So it's not like you have to take a broad spectrum like engineering of engineering courses. Like, so if you're not doing structures, you don't have to take a structures course. So yeah, I think it's important to be focused, making sure that you're attending class and learning something, but don't spend all of your time in graduate school focusing just on classwork, because there's going to be times where, you know, you're here to do research for the most part, and you don't want the fact that you have all the worry of doing a class, like turning in all the homeworks and making hundreds and all that stuff, to like outweigh your ability to do what you originally are in graduate school for. It's a bit divisive, but yeah, sorry. It's my perspective.
Yeah, so at least from my experience so far, I will say the classes are definitely harder, so don't think that they're easier or anything like that. But having 3 classes instead of 5, where one of them is probably a music class and the other one's a history class, it kind of it helps you focus on the classes in that sense, because when you only have the three classes, you're more, you have more time to spend looking into like, okay, why is the equation that way, or why is this graph look like this. Whereas in undergrad, you kind of just look at it, you say, oh, okay, well, that's what it is, and you move on. And so, and at least from what I've done so far, I've already gone back and looked through like vibrations homework that we did in undergrad to try and figure out my graduate structural dynamics class. So you do go back and you use that knowledge again. So it's nice to be able to go back and actually figure out, oh, that's what that stuff actually meant. But yeah, so.
The next question is, what resources or websites would you suggest for researching universities to go to graduate school?
So I guess I would say, if you know you want to pursue aerospace engineering, then you can go grab like the top, I don't know, 100 ranked graduates or universities for graduate school. And then from there, narrow it down based on destination, get a couple ideas. And then really when you have a few ideas of, oh, maybe I plan to go to University of Maryland or Georgia Tech or whatever, then you actually go onto their department websites and then look at their research labs. Because most websites or most universities will have websites specifically dedicated to the individual research labs. So when you do that, you can pull up more information on like what specific research they're doing. And then from there, you can make your decision as to whether or not you want to like email a professor from there to get more information.
I 100% agree. And I have nothing to add to that.
Yep, pretty much. Internet, it's a crazy thing.
Are there any more questions from the audience? You can just unmute yourself and go for it. Okay, I guess not. Do you all have any parting advice, I guess, that you would give to your past self or to students that are looking into applying for graduate school?
I guess just to reiterate that your advisor and making sure you get along with your advisor is very important. You're going to be working with them for either 2 or 3 years or 4 or 5 years. So you want to make sure that you guys are on the same page and get along.
Yeah, I will say, sort of in addition to that, don't just go to a school for the name. If you get into MIT, don't just go because it's MIT. I know someone who did that, ended up with a professor that he really did not like, and he wanted to do a PhD, but only ended up doing a master's and left early. And he had an opportunity from Dr. Worley to stay here, but he declined it to go to MIT for the name. And that's literally what he told me. So make sure that your advisor is good. Otherwise, grad school's great. Having a blast.
My advice would be definitely do the master's degree. Like, it's good. I think it's a really good degree to have. And hey, you can get an online degree nowadays. So like, we're probably going to be pandemicking for a little longer. So if you're like in your senior year, just apply to grad school. Just stick with that for a bit. But no, seriously, I would say, I would agree with what Emily said. Like the advisor relationship is the most important thing. And like what Peter said, it's not about where you go. It does, like, honestly, when I like for your undergraduate degree, getting into MIT is great. But for a master's or a PhD, people don't necessarily look at that. They just look at the quality of the research that you did. So, yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Roshan.
Yeah, I guess I was gonna ask. I mean, I'm sorry if I missed this earlier, but I guess could you guys talk a bit about maybe the pros and cons from your eyes of attending graduate school part-time while working. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Good. I mean, I don't have much to say about it other than I think doing it part-time is, I think it's more work than, or you're kind of spanning it over a lot of time. And I think it ends up being a lot of work because chances are you're doing your work, your actual job, like full-time. And then on top of that, a class or two. And so it's just a lot. So I just went ahead and gonna do it in 2 years. So yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. It's definitely, I don't have firsthand experience, but I know people who have done it. And it's definitely a huge time commitment to take classes and work, or do research and work. But that being said, if you're at a company that will pay for you to take night classes, that might be worth it.
Yeah, I would say that it really is just circumstantial. If the company you're working for is not only just willing to pay for you to take graduate classes, but also allowing you to like do your part of your work as your research in some ways, then those types of situations can really be great. But otherwise, like particularly like a PhD, you can't. I don't think you can really do part-time work for that. So for the master's degree, it would probably be easier or more feasible to work part-time if you were only doing classwork. So if you're doing like a non-thesis option. But once research comes into play, I think the game changes and your time just gets totally absorbed into your research. So it's really circumstantial.
Yeah, I will add, someone in my lab is doing a PhD part-time while also working, and it's taking him a very long time. It's a longer time commitment for sure.
And sorry, Peter, did you say that you were working with, I mean, I know you said you're doing it full time, but did you say that you're kind of working with the company or something like that?
So I'm working part-time is what the official like thing says with the Army Research Lab. But so essentially it's supposed to be 10 hours a week, but essentially it just means that you do research alongside classwork. So it's not really the same as working at Boeing and going to a local university and taking classes. It's a little different in that sense. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, you're not working full time and part time school. You're
Yeah,
working
exactly.
part time and doing full time school. Okay.
Yeah. And I will say as another parting thought, especially during like maybe this is something to reconsider later on, but due to the pandemic and working from home, I think I would rather be doing schoolwork at home rather than working at a company from home. That's just, I think a lot of people would agree with that. I would rather be, not because a big advantage of working at a company is going and meeting people and quite frankly having a fun time, right? And it's kind of hard to do that when you're stuck on Zoom all day. So for me, I also just find it easier to sit down and focus on academics when there's nothing going on. So yeah, maybe something to reconsider, in a year from now. Hopefully we're not in the same situation, but yeah.
Any final questions for our panel? No. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Oh,
Oh, sure.
I just am curious. Sorry, maybe you might have already said this or anything, but I guess I'm just curious. And I know, but Peter, I assume you just started grad school, but do you guys already have like a dream like job already?
I don't. I don't really know where I would like to end up, but I don't have to worry about that for like another year and a half. So
Yeah, my dream job kind of changed like because I was originally working And when I decided to do the PhD, I was like, oh, I want to get my PhD so I can be on like the development side of like software development for CFD. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do. But then after being in grad school, I'm now like, I really want to be a professor. So things kind of just like changed a lot.
That's a big change for sure.
What about you, Peter? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Dream job. Oh boy. I don't know. I kind of jump back and forth on things. Like for me, a dream job is something where I can go and do sort of what I want to do. I don't like being bossed around. I don't think anybody likes being bossed around. If you're really interested in aerospace engineering, then like I assume all of you are for even attending this, chances are you want to do your own thing, and that's kind of where the master's degree and PhD can open doors for you and give you that opportunity. And plenty of people with master's degrees start companies, so there's that option. Not many people with bachelor's degrees start companies. You can do research on that and you can find that out pretty easily. If you look up various companies and you look at their CEOs and such, chances are they almost always will have some sort of higher degree education. So anyway, that's a little different, but yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think that'll go ahead and conclude the panel. Thank you all so much for your time and for your wonderful advice. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for hosting us.
Yeah, thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks everybody.
Bye. Thank you all.